There's a quiet trap that Brene Brown has watched people fall into for decades. It looks like confidence. It sounds like ambition. It even gets rewarded by the world, but underneath it, something is unstable. A person walks into a room feeling strong until someone smarter speaks. They feel proud of their work until it's criticized. They feel worthy until they fail. So what exactly collapsed? Was it confidence or something deeper? Brene Brown would pause here and ask a sharper question. What was holding that confidence up in the first place? Because if your sense of value rises and falls based on outcomes, approval, or comparison, then what you're experiencing isn't self-worth, it's self-esteem. And those two are not the same thing, even though most people treat them like identical twins. This confusion creates a subtle kind of suffering. A person spends years trying to build confidence, chasing achievements, polishing their image, collecting validation, only to find that the feeling never stays. It leaks. It fades. It demands constant repair. Why? Because it was never built on solid ground. Brene Brown often spoke about how people learn very early to trade who they are for who they think they need to be. A child notices when praise comes. Good grades, good behavior, being liked. And without realizing it, they begin to connect worth with performance. Do well, feel worthy. Fail, feel small. Simple. And quietly destructive. Now here's the uncomfortable part. That pattern doesn't disappear with age. It gets more sophisticated. Instead of gold stars, it becomes promotions. Instead of approval from parents, it becomes approval from peers, partners, strangers online. The system remains the same. Perform, earn, prove. So when people say they want higher self-esteem, Brene Brown would tilt her head slightly and wonder if they're solving the wrong problem. Because self-esteem can be built and lost over and over again. Self-worth is different. It doesn't ask for proof. It doesn't wait for permission. And it doesn't collapse when life gets difficult. In this video, you're going to see the exact difference between these two forces, how one keeps you stuck in a loop of chasing and how the other gives you something far more stable. But here's the real question to keep in mind as we move forward. If everything you've achieved disappeared tomorrow, who would you be left with? And would that be enough? Brene Brown didn't treat self-worth and self-esteem as abstract ideas. She treated them as forces that shape how people move through the world. And once you see the difference clearly, it becomes hard to unsee. The first difference is this. Self-esteem is earned. Self-worth is accepted. Self-esteem grows when you succeed. You perform well, you solve a problem, you achieve something others recognize. There's a lift that comes with it, a sense of I did something valuable. And there's nothing wrong with that. But Brene Brown would often point out the hidden condition attached to it. The feeling only lasts as long as the performance holds up. Imagine a lawyer who wins case after case. Confidence builds. Reputation grows. But one public failure, just one and, suddenly the ground shifts. Doubt creeps in. Identity shakes. What changed? Not their ability overnight, not their intelligence, only the outcome. That's self-esteem. It depends on evidence. Self-worth doesn't work that way. It doesn't ask, what did you achieve today? It asks, are you still human today? And the answer to that question doesn't change based on success or failure. Brene Brown believed this distinction becomes most visible in moments people try to avoid failure, rejection, embarrassment. These are the exact moments where self-esteem tends to collapse. But they're also the moments where self-worth, if it exists, quietly holds the line. Here's the second difference. Self-esteem compares. Self-worth includes. Self-esteem is always scanning. Am I doing better than them? Worse than them? Where do I rank? Even when it feels like confidence, there's often a scoreboard running in the background. Brene Brown noticed how exhausting that becomes because there's always someone ahead, always someone behind, and neither position brings peace for long. Now consider self-worth. It doesn't remove ambition. It doesn't make a person passive, but it removes the need to measure your value against someone else's life. A person can admire without shrinking, compete without losing themselves, succeed without needing others to fail. That's a different kind of stability. And then comes the third difference, the one most people resist. Self-esteem avoids weakness. Self-worth allows it. Brene Brown spent years studying vulnerability, and she saw something most people miss. When your value depends on being strong, you start hiding anything that looks like weakness. You edit yourself. You protect your image. You become careful in ways that slowly disconnect you from your own life. But if your worth isn't on the line, something shifts. You can admit mistakes without collapsing. You can ask for help without shame. You can be seen as you are instead of constantly managing how you appear. And that's where something unexpected happens. Growth becomes possible because you're no longer spending all your energy pretending. So now the question changes again. If you're honest with yourself, are you trying to become better, or are you trying to prove that you already are? Brene Brown noticed that people rarely switch from self-esteem to self-worth in one clean decision. It doesn't happen in a single insight or a burst of motivation. It happens in small, uncomfortable moments where a person chooses a different response than they're used to, and those moments are easy to miss. The first pattern shows up in how people handle failure. When self-esteem is in charge, failure feels like exposure. It's not just I did something wrong. It quietly becomes, there's something wrong with me. So the reaction is predictable. Defend, explain, hide, or avoid trying again altogether. Brene Brown would watch people twist themselves into explanations just to protect their image. Not because they were dishonest, but because their identity felt at risk. Now look at the same moment through self-worth. Failure still stings. That doesn't disappear, but it doesn't rewrite your identity. It stays where it belongs as an event, not a definition. That single shift changes behavior. A person with self-worth can say, that didn't work, without adding a second sentence that attacks who they are. And because of that, they recover faster. They try again sooner. They learn without turning the lesson into self-judgment. The second pattern appears in relationships. Self-esteem turns connection into a negotiation. Approval becomes currency. People start asking questions they don't say out loud. Do they like me? Am I enough for them? What do I need to do to keep this? And without realizing it, they adjust. They agree when they don't mean it. They stay quiet when something matters. They shape themselves into what they think will be accepted. Brene Brown saw how this slowly drains a person. Because even when they are accepted, there's a quiet doubt underneath it. If they knew the real me, would this still hold? Self-worth changes that dynamic. It allows a person to enter a relationship without bargaining away parts of themselves. There's still care, still effort, still compromise when needed, but not at the cost of their own voice. And here's the part people don't expect. This doesn't push others away. It filters. The connections that remain are built on something real, not maintained through constant performance. Then comes the third pattern, how people talk to themselves when no one is listening. Brene Brown paid close attention to this because it reveals everything. Self-esteem tends to borrow its voice from the outside world. Sounds loud. Criticism sounds louder. And when things go wrong, that inner voice can become sharp, impatient, even harsh. It pushes. It demands. It keeps score. Self-worth sounds different. It's steady. Not soft in a weak way, but grounded. It holds a person accountable without tearing them down. It says, you can do better, without adding, because you're failing as a person. That voice becomes a kind of anchor. And once someone experiences that even briefly, they start to notice how much energy they used to spend fighting themselves. So now the question becomes more direct. When things go wrong in your life, who is speaking inside your head? And is that voice helping you stand or quietly knocking you down? Brene Brown didn't ask people to destroy their self-esteem. She understood its place. Achievement matters. Effort matters. Growth matters. But she was careful about where a person builds their foundation. Because if your identity sits on top of performance, life becomes a series of tests you can never fully pass. There's always another standard, another comparison, another moment where things might fall apart, and people feel it. They wake up tired without knowing why. They hesitate before taking risks they actually care about. They hold back parts of themselves in rooms where they want to belong, not because they lack ability, because they don't feel safe being seen without conditions. Brene Brown would return to a quieter idea. One that doesn't demand attention but changes everything once it settles in. Your worth is not something you earn after you prove yourself. It's something you carry before you do anything at all. And if that sounds uncomfortable, it should, because it removes the system most people rely on. The system where effort guarantees value. The system where success protects identity. Without that system, a person has to face a different kind of question. If I am already worthy, then why am I still trying to prove it? That question can feel unsettling at first. It strips away a familiar way of operating. But it also creates space. Space to take risks without tying them to identity. Space to fail without turning it into a personal verdict. Space to build a life that reflects who you are, instead of constantly adjusting to earn approval. Brene Brown believed this is where real courage begins. Not in loud moments, not in public wins, but in quiet decisions where a person chooses to stand on their own worth even when nothing around them confirms it. So before you move on, sit with this for a second. The next time you succeed, will you treat it as proof of your value? Or simply as something you did? And the next time you fail, will you treat it as evidence against you? Or just as something that happened? That distinction seems small. It isn't. It decides how you live. Now here's something worth thinking about, Tand. I'd actually like you to answer this in the comments. When was the last time you felt worthy without achieving anything first? Not after success, not after praise, just as you are. If that moment feels hard to find, that tells you exactly where the work is. If this made you pause and think, subscribe for more conversations like this. Not louder, just clearer. And one more thing, said plainly and without confusion, this channel is not affiliated with Brene Brown or any of their official representatives. The content you just watched is educational in nature, inspired by the publicly available teachings, writings, and interviews of Brene Brown. It does not constitute professional advice. Before making any major decision in this area, please do your own research and consult a qualified professional.